Starting off with the Peacemaker program, we've covered it a lot, I know, but it's been a year. How do you measure its success? Because I know it's been successful, and what is to come this year that we should know about?
Well, it's a very good question because the peacemakers are violence prevention, violence interruption, and sometimes it's very difficult to prove a negative. But I think that the way we judge how well all of our crime reduction efforts, including violence prevention and violence interruption, is just the fact that we experienced in 2022 overall about a 16 to 17% reduction in criminal homicides and nearly a 12 to 13% reduction in non-fatal shootings. And that's year over year. We actually last year had fewer criminal homicides and fewer non-fatal shootings than 2021 or 2020, which is important as the mark of the beginning of the global pandemic. There's no question that gun violence in every major urban area in the country in the year of the pandemic started to rise exponentially. And I believe that the success can be seen in the level of decrease. Now, we're not declaring victory. We still have a ways to go, a long ways to go. One homicide is unacceptable to me, but the numbers are going in the right direction, and that is appreciably down.
What's to come this year? I know you're adding more peacemakers. Last I heard it was around, is it 60 in all?
Yeah, I think we're at 40 now. We'd like to get to 50, and then maybe as that increases. And I think that it's a program that is starting to pay enormous dividends in neighborhoods throughout the city. Because as I said, the police are an important part of public safety. There's no two ways about that. But by the very nature of a police department, it's reactive. I mean, something bad happens, the call comes in, the police officers are dispatched to find out what happens. Our peacemaking program and our violence interruption programs are investments that we're making in the neighborhoods, using people who have credibility in those neighborhoods and who really keep an eye on how do we prevent that gun from being used in some kind of way to resolve conflict, or how can we prevent that gun from being used because we know that a house in a neighborhood is a house where drug dealing takes place. In other words, we try to get ahead of the violence and prevent it before it happens.
And when this launched, this was a 3-year plan, right? Is that still the
Yes.
case, or will that continue?
No,
past the 3-year mark?
it's a 3-year commitment using largely the American Rescue Plan dollars. 2022 is now in the books, and as I said, the results have been encouraging. 2023. And then the final year will be 2024. And we'll probably continue to make these types of public safety investments in years following. But we're using the American Rescue Plan dollars that we receive from the Congress to fund our 3-year commitment. That also includes, by the way, $15 million a year to neighborhood and community organizations who are dedicated to violence prevention. And that also, I think, is having a profound positive effect because no one knows a neighborhood better than the neighbors themselves. And if you have an active group, whether it's a crime watch group or just a neighborhood organization, we want to fund those organizations that will help avoid situations that happen from time to time from turning into deadly incidents of violence.
I want to turn to the homeless population. You know, we see this, there's a tremendous need on the street. Homeless people, providing food access, the proper nutrition, mental health. Tell me a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes, because I know there is a tremendous effort behind the scenes. And how do you hope to reach more people with a critical need this year?
Well, first, I think it's important to underscore that in 2022, we actually saw a 9% overall decrease in the number of unsheltered residents of our city. Now, that number is the result of a review or survey that's done every year, usually right about this time, the coldest stretch of weather, and it's called the point-in-time count. And it attempts, not just in Indianapolis, but in other cities as well, to determine what your unsheltered population happens to be. And in 2022, that number went down 9%. Now, soon, the point-in-time count will be done for 2023, and we'll have to wait to see what the results are. But to answer your question about what is going on, we are, as a city, making unprecedented investments in homeless prevention and unsheltered population being given sheltered, and habitable opportunities. And that manifests itself directly from our Housing First strategy, where we are investing in providing permanent supportive housing to anybody and everybody who needs it. And just the other day, I was over at the Central Indiana Community Foundation to help receive a $400,000 donation from the IU Health Foundation for the wraparound social services that we are providing as part of our Housing First strategy. So, just to reiterate, permanent supportive housing units have to be found. We have to place people who are currently homeless in the permanent supportive housing. But most importantly is the $5 to $10 million that we are investing in the supportive services that are necessary to help people stay housed. Because if you have been out on the streets for any period of time, it's not an easy transition. It's not just it's great, I've got an apartment now, I'll just move in. And no, I mean, you're dealing with a population that oftentimes is struggling with mental health issues, mental illness, substance abuse, and addictions. There are a lot of things that are going on that have created someone who has found themselves out of work, out of a place to live, and so we provide the wraparound social services that they need, that help them to become acclimated to living inside rather than living on the streets.
And I know it's a double-edged sword for those folks who are living in the neighborhood near where these shelters are, who say, I don't want this in my neighborhood. Do you get a lot of resistance there, and how do you combat that?
Yeah, there's always some concern that neighbors have. The primary concern, frankly, is from downtown businesses who do have a concern about unsheltered individuals who populate our downtown area. Now, the truth is, most of the people that appear downtown and who people would just assume are homeless, they're not homeless at all. They're staying in shelters, but they also happen to be unemployed. So when the shelter opens in the morning and they matriculate out of the shelter, then they just hang around downtown because they have nothing else to do. We're working with our outreach coordinators to help provide mental health services and homelessness prevention services. We partner very closely with Horizon House and other homeless service providers in record amounts. And most of that money, by the way, also comes from the federal government by the way of grants for homeless intervention, disruption, and prevention.
Yeah, getting more people downtown. There's a lot of businesses that are sitting empty downtown. Tell us about how you hope to get more businesses, more folks downtown. Yeah,
I mean, it's a brave new world because of the pandemic. I mean, our downtown has changed, just like every other urban area in the country. But I think that what we're doing is investing not only in more public safety and the resiliency strategies that Downtown Indy Inc. are partnering with us. For those businesses that are not as busy as they were, for buildings that perhaps are vacant now, we are investing $3.6 billion in development for downtown, a lot of which will be residential, because we do have people. Let's say, for example, a business has gone to a hybrid schedule of work, and as a result, you don't have as many workers coming downtown, but you still have a lot of people who are wanting to live downtown. So part of the investment, part of the development strategies that we'll be employing over the next 4 or 5 years are to convert businesses and buildings that are currently unoccupied or maybe not used quite as much as they were pre-pandemic, and turn those into residential places for young people largely, or older people like myself who want the vibrancy of living downtown.
What's the status of Circle Center Mall?
Well, we continue to work with the owners of the Circle Center Mall to address a vision for transforming what was a large urban mall that has historic property and quality to it, and what that will look like. Now, no final decisions have been made. I can tell you that the city, the state, and the ownership group are talking to developers. I don't think there's a formal RFP that's been distributed yet, but I can tell you that hopeful conversations are taking place, and there's no question that the redevelopment of Circle Center Mall will be a priority of this administration as long as I'm in the office.
Okay, so this year you hope to have some kind of...
I would hope we'd have some announcements reasonably soon about progress that's been made in thinking through how to re-energize and rejuvenate the Circle Center Mall. The notion of an urban mall is probably not one of them. But
when you say urban mall, just like what it is now.
Yeah. I mean, Circle Center Mall was extraordinarily successful in its day, which was really the early to mid 90s. We're now 20 to 30 years later, and frankly, retail as an industry has changed, but particularly downtown malls, which again, Indianapolis is not the only city that has a downtown mall. Downtown malls all over the country have struggled, and as retail has changed, then our strategies for how the urban mall that currently exists, it's by the way always been profitable. It's, I think, only 1 year over the last 20 has the downtown mall lost money.
Really?
Even with the drastic change in retail in an urban setting. I should be a little bit clearer. Malls everywhere are struggling, but particularly in urban areas, we have to think differently and more creatively about how that space can be used.
What are some of the things that are being proposed in that space?
Well, it could be anything. I mean, it could be could be residential. It could be commercial. It could be mixed use. Some have proposed that we use part of the downtown mall for a music venue or a concert venue. It could be a wide variety of different things. And I'm glad to be working in partnership with the state and the ownership group to think big about how that space can be used and bring greater prosperity to people downtown Indianapolis.
Update on Jail 1 and 2, and then the heliport as well.
Right. Jail 1, the Marion County Jail, will remain where it is for at least another year. Nobody's in the jail, but the problem is that our forensics lab for Marion County is in the basement. A new state-of-the-art forensics lab is in the process of being built on the site of the Community Justice Campus, but that's about a year away from being completed. We can't move the forensics lab from Jail 1 to the new forensics lab out on the Community Justice Campus until it's done. So at least for a year, that property will just sit largely empty. I can also tell you that once that property is raised, which is what we will do once it is completely empty, it'll probably be one of the hottest pieces of property in all of downtown. Jail 2 and the Arrestee Processing Center behind it have already undergone an RFP process, and a developer has been selected. The 1820 group will be rehabbing and revitalizing both Jail 2 and the Arrestee Processing Center. The heliport is in the process of being decommissioned by the FAA, and what will how we will transform that piece of property is still a decision yet to be made. But that property will also look differently than it currently does.
Some of the other suburbs, their roads are now aging out too. How do you hope to improve roads this year?
Yeah, it just coincidentally, yesterday morning, I was up in Noblesville meeting with the Regional Development Authority for Central Indiana that has been recently created. And we were discussing in great length with leaders from all of Central Indiana, particularly the contiguous counties to Marion, who, as you just said, understand that while their roads aren't quite as old and nowhere near as old as the roads in Indianapolis, their roads are aging out, and they see down the road a really need for a more equitable road funding formula. And that's what collectively we'll be talking about in the hallways of the General Assembly with the members of both the House and the Senate to come up with more equitable distribution of state monies for infrastructure investment. And that's not to say that it's Central Indiana alone. The same issues that we face are faced by communities like Fort Wayne, South Bend, Northwest Indiana, Evansville, the more heavily populated areas, which, by the way, in my estimation, are not treated fairly or less fairly or differently than more rural areas. We just are seeking a little bit more of an equitable distribution that acknowledges the road usage and traffic that we experience here in Indianapolis that many places in the state don't experience because they're less populated.
2023, your 3 biggest priorities for the city.
Yeah, I would say that a constant effort to reduce the level of violence, gun violence in particular, that our city experiences. And as we previously talked, we're making progress in that area. More investment in infrastructure. I was glad that the City County Council just last year in the budget process passed a $1.1 billion infrastructure investment over the next several years. And then I guess my third priority would be overall quality of life issues to provide our residents and our citizens with the best quality of life we can to give them. A good example of recent announcements we've made in that regard is the announcement last week of $80 million Lilly Endowment investment in our city's parks. 42 parks all over all 9 townships are going to be significantly transformed. Along with the endowment, the city of Indianapolis is also committed $25 million with a $25 million match from the endowment for our trails, our greenways, our public spaces, so that neighborhoods throughout the city can improve the quality of place of their neighborhoods. And that, by the way, also has a public safety element involved. If you have nice parks, good greenways and trails, that oftentimes keeps people, particularly our young people, busy doing positive things and maybe avoiding making bad choices.